Hey everybody, it is your neighborhood sewing friend, Julia of Old Spool Sewing Studio in Brielle, New Jersey. I am going to teach you today how to make this adorable hand-sewn cactus. Could double as a pin cushion, is definitely super cute and able to be decorated with flowers of your choice. A great project for people who are new to hand sewing or people who are experienced in hand sewing, because there's a whole bunch of stitching happen on this. So let's get to it. All right, let's go over the materials that you're going to need to make your cactus. You'll need some fabric, which if you bought a kit from me, you have some rayon wool blend felt that will be awesome for sewing in. Felt is really great to use for hand sewing projects because it doesn't fray when you cut it. If you have some polyester felt around the house, that's great too, but I love using wool and wool blends because they'll eventually biodegrade, as opposed to polyester felt, which is plastic and it's going to end up in a landfill somewhere. You'll need some sort of thread. I included embroidery floss for everybody who got a kit. It's also great because it makes it really pretty on the edges as opposed to just regular thread because it's a little bit thicker. You'll need, obviously, a hand sewing needle. Where did I put mine? Hand sewing needle, which here's my little collection of hand sewing needles. Fabric scissors and paper scissors. If you know me, I'm crazy about making sure that they're separate, so my fabric scissors are here, as long as also with my paper scissors. If you don't have a separate pair of fabric and paper scissors, that's totally okay. Just make sure you have something that's sharp enough to cut your fabric. Pins are going to be super helpful, but if you don't have pins, safety pins will also help you when you start to put things together. If you don't like pinning and cutting stuff out, a marker to have around or a pen is great, because then you'll be able to trace your pattern and then cut it out. And if you're making your own pattern because you didn't get a pattern from me, a ruler and a pencil will really help you. Speaking of the pattern, make sure you grab your cactus sewing pattern that I created. Look, here's my little hand sewing needle I gave everybody, and here are your cutting instructions if anyone doesn't realize what they gotta cut. So let's do it, baby. Oh, also, if you don't have felt, you can also use t-shirt material. Maybe recycle an old t-shirt that you've got lying around the house, because hey, let's sew with what we got, right? Let's get started. Let's go over what to do if you don't have a pattern to follow already. This is a super simple shape to follow, so it's really easy to draw it yourself. If you want to keep it the same proportion as mine, I'm just over 4 inches, about 4 1/4 wide by, let's see, 5 inches tall, and that's a very easy thing for you to draw on your own. I'm going to use my little ruler to get a straight line on the bottom. I can mark up 5 inches, mark across a little bit bigger than 4, and there is the shape. You want to leave the base nice and wide because it's going to make it a lot easier for us to stuff once we're almost done sewing. But yeah, I mean, that was really easy for me to draw a pattern. The pot's a little bit trickier, but really it's a long rectangle, and whatever this distance is the circumference of this circle. And we'll talk about that in a little bit to determine length of circumference and how to draw those circles. But for now, you want to get your pattern out. And if you've drawn it, that's awesome, but I'm going to use mine, and you're going to want to grab your paper scissors and cut that baby out. So I went ahead and I actually made tracing paper pieces of all of my pattern pieces so that I had something easier to follow. I always love to trace my patterns off so that I can keep my original intact. So let's start with our cactus. You want to grab your felt, and here I actually have 2 layers because I'm feeling confident enough to cut 2 at a time. That's really common in sewing. If you or your little one doesn't feel super confident in cutting, especially these curved shapes that are a little tricky, you can do 1 at a time. Now, there are 2 ways we can go about cutting out from our felt. You can stick your pattern down right in the middle, make sure it's not hanging off any of the edges. Grab your pins and pin to cut. So your pins are going to be along the perimeter of the pattern but not hanging off the edge. And then you can grab your fabric scissors. You know, you want to put a good amount of pins in there to really hold it down. And like I said before, if you don't have pins, safety pins work really well too. You can pin safety pins right through, and you can cut this out. Now, if you don't feel super confident, or your little one's hands are just not as confident, you can always grab that marker I mentioned and trace right along the outside edge of your pattern piece and cut on that line. But for this video's sake, I am going to double them up, pin it out, and cut them. Got my fabric scissors. See how they're labeled because I'm a little crazy. Remember, good cutting technique is that you have everything on the table. Your scissors are also touching the table. You use your non-dominant hand to control, and you're going to take nice long alligator chomps to go all the way around. And cutting curves is a really great thing for little hands to practice. You turn the scissors and your fabric as you're turning around the corners. You don't do a lot of these. You're going to get weird, not so straight edges. You want nice long cuts. So there's that. And then right across the bottom. And there we go. Cut out our pattern pieces. And you're going to want to go ahead and do that with all of your other pieces. I actually already cut some out because I wanted to be prepared today. So here's my pot. When you're done cutting, you're going to pull your pins out. And if you cut 2 layers at a time, you're going to want to leave them together. If you're cutting 1 at a time, you're going to want to layer up 2 at a time. Each of these is 2 layers of felt. Let's do it. Let's sew. So pins again are super helpful. If you want to stick a pin in the center, be aware that you have a pin in the middle there. You can poke yourself pretty easily. If you do have safety pins around, safety pins are also really helpful for holding it in place. So I'm going to stick a safety pin in there because then that bad boy's not going to move while I'm sewing. Make sure you go through all your layers. Now you're going to want to grab your thread. Where'd I put my thread? Here's this guy, and you're going to want to get your hand sewing needle, which mine are hidden. Here are my needles, and here's one I already pre-threaded, so I got that. Now, if you have a full piece of embroidery floss like this, please be very careful not to get it all tangled once you start sewing. You can pull off the edges, but what I always love to do the moment I open a piece of embroidery floss is I wind it onto some old cardboard. So just make a little saver for it because this guy can get tangled so easily if we're not being careful. Separate it so that it looks like a nice ring. And find the end. Look, that wasn't too hard. The end's right there. And what you're going to want to do is cut a piece that is about as long as your arm. So what I usually do is I hold it in my fingertips and I stretch out my arm nice and straight. And I got a piece, I actually am over a grid right now, and I can tell that I've got a piece that's about 20 inches, 22 inches long. And I'm going to cut the end of it. Now, embroidery floss is what we call stranded. So if you take a look, there's actually 6 strands of thread in this piece of floss. We are going to, for ease of usability, we're going to separate out into 3 and 3, or you can separate it into 1 or 2 and 2 and 2, but you want to be very careful as you pull them apart because they are lightly twisted, or the word is plied together. So see how they really want to twist, so you're going to be really careful as you pull them apart. In trouble too. It's always tricky. It's always good to have a third hand in here so someone can hold them, and if someone puts their hand right down here and helps it untwist as it goes down, really makes a difference. So let's get our thread all the way prepped and ready to rock and roll. Now I have 3 and 3. If you have 2 and 2, or if you have a bunch of 1s, if you manage to separate 1, that's great. I'm going to use 3 just because that's what I'm able to use. So then you're going to want to grab your needle and thread your needle. This is going to be tricky if you have multiple strands of thread. A really great technique is to actually take the thread, if you hang it, fold it around the needle, and you pull the needle out, you can usually get that little fold through the eye of the needle. Let's see if I can do it. Nope, not today. But be patient. Try not to split your thread while you're doing this. And in the meantime, this is why I pre-threaded a needle. So I'm going to I'm going to put that aside, grab my pre-threaded needle. So now if you can see, I threaded my needle, but there is one edge free and my knot is over here. So you have to tie a knot in one end of the thread and then you want to leave one part free. Try not to double it up unless you really, really want a look of a thicker thread, because that would make it a lot shorter. If I did two pieces knotted together, it would be this short, as opposed to with only one end knotted, I can have this long piece of a thread. Cool? So if you need help tying knots, I usually do knots around my fingers, so if you want to watch, you can give this a try. You pinch it in between your pointer finger and your thumb. You're going to wrap it around your pointer finger at least once, and when in doing so, you want to make sure that it crisscrosses. So I go from here, I'm going over to there, and I come back around. I'm going to roll it off my finger without it coming off, and you want to make sure, see how it's rolling in on itself? And then I pinch and pull, and I get a nice fat knot. And a nice fat knot's totally cool because you don't want that coming out. Alrighty? So, now we're ready to sew. While you're sewing your cactus, you have a few different options for the type of stitch that you use. Now, these two have already been pre-sewn. This one's got a little bit left, so I can show you how to do this stitch. But the most common and simplest hand sewing technique is called a whip stitch. And what a whip stitch does is it just goes in through the front and out the back, and it creates a stitch that kind of looks like a bunch of little dash marks like this. There's the edge, and you can see I went through both layers when I did this stitch. So that's a whip stitch. And then there's also something called a blanket stitch, and I really love a blanket stitch because if you look, it creates like this little ridge of threads, and it has a very different look from whip stitching. It's more of a vertical line as opposed to the whip stitch gives you more of a diagonal line, and then that's the difference on the edge of the two. So I always love a blanket stitch, especially if I do it in a contrasting thread. I think that looks really cute. So, but we're using green on green today because we're making a nice green cactus. So let's go over how to do a whip stitch first, and then I'm going to show you how to finish with how to do a blanket stitch, and you can choose whichever you prefer to sew up your cactus. So you grab your thread, you've got a knot in one end, and you're going to grab the pieces that you're going to sew together. Let's move these guys to the side for a second. And making believe where my safety pin is, this is the good side of my fabric. So if you're using other types of fabric, you want the right side sticking out. Oops, sorry about that. Now, to start any hand sewing, the best thing to do is not to go right in from the outside. You want to look inside the two layers of fabric. So this is the inside of my cactus, and I'm actually going to start by going through from the inside to the outside. Can you guys see that? This is because that ugly knot I've got at the end, I want to hide it on the inside of my project. So to do a whip stitch, I'm going to stick the needle in close to this bottom corner. If you guys can see, I'm starting, this is my flat edge, I'm starting on one corner. You're going to stick it through the felt, pull all the way through. Oop, nice big knot, I got to make sure that guy's hidden. And make sure when you pull this needle, if you have it threaded like I do, always put your fingers at the bottom of the needle and hold the thread and the needle. If you just pull the needle, you're going to unthread yourself, and that's a pain in the patootie. So we're going to take our thread and our needle, and to do a whip stitch, this is a great technique to know, you're going to poke your needle from front to back, straight through both layers. You can see I'm catching both layers, but I'm also pretty close to the edge of the fabric. You don't want to stick it all the way down here, and you don't want to be right on the edge. And like I said before, grab the bottom of the needle and the thread and pull tight. There's one. Now we're going to move over about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch. Big thing in hand sewing. You want to keep your stitches close together. You don't want your fluff to be flying out later or your thing to fall apart, so you need your hand sewing stitches to be close together. So I've poked it front to back and I pull tight. So let's do this together for a second. You can see I'm holding the fabric in my left hand. I've got the part that I'm sewing on the top, and I'm going to poke front to back and pull tight. Oop, got caught. Move over a little bit, front to back, catch both layers, and pull tight. And as you can see, start to get a little whip stitch. I know it won't focus. There it is. There's my little whip stitch. All right, so you're going to keep going and stitching around the rounded edge of your cactus until you run low on thread. You want to stop when you have about a hand's length of thread left because you have to tie a knot. You do not want to just pull this fabric out. Remember, we always need knots in sewing because things don't fall apart. So really quick, let me make believe that we don't have a lot of thread left and we have to tie off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to poke through the front layer only. Can you see that? I went through the front layer only and I put the needle halfway through. I'm going to grab the working thread, which is the thread that's coming out of my project, and I'm going to wrap it around the needle. 1, 2, let's do it 3 times for a good knot. And then I'm going to pull my needle out the rest of the way. And that's going to create a nice tight knot right in there. And then, if you want to get extra fancy and bury your knot, you're going to stick your needle inside and come out. I'm only coming out the front layer about 1 inch away from where we made our knots. My knot's here, I'm coming out over here, and that's going to help hide that tail. Grab my scissors and cut. Careful not to cut your fabric. So there's a whip stitch, and that's how you can tie a knot. Alrighty guys, so I taught you how to do a whip stitch. If you like that, go for it. Remember, you're going to work all the way around the curved side of your cactus, but if you want to learn how to do a blanket stitch and up your hand sewing skills, let's do that now. So move this guy out of the way. Here's the one that I had been blanket stitching. Remember, that gives you a cute little ridge around your cactus part. And now we're going to tie a knot. Pinch, wrap, roll, pinch, pull. This is really tricky. I can do another video on how to tie a knot for hand sewing. Honest, you can just stick it on the table and do an easy overhand knot if you want. It's whatever works best. So to do a blanket stitch, best way to start a blanket stitch, remember we're going to start on the inside, but I'm actually going to come out on the front. So if you see, I'm coming up for the front of my cactus leaf and pull tight so you can't see my knot. See where my knot ends up? Ends up where I put my needle in. And I'm going to put the thread out and hanging off the top, because what we're going to do in a blanket stitch is you want to poke your needle through. This is the first stitch. We're going to go right into where we came out, through both layers like we were with a whip stitch, but you're going to wrap the thread around the back of your needle. Did you guys see how I did that? One more time. I'm going to wrap the thread so the needle comes in front of it, and then I pull. Then I'm going to hold the thread towards the back. If every time you do this, you keep the thread towards the back of your project and don't pull it this way, that helps. So keep your thread towards the back of your project. I'm going to go through both layers, and I'm going to grab my thread and make sure it is behind, oop, I got caught, behind my needle. Can you see that? Behind. And I'm going to pull tight. You hold it in your left hand. And for lefties, you just work opposite. So behind, you guys see that? And pull tight. And if you pull tight by pulling directly away, see how I'm pulling in this direction? I want to pull towards me, I don't want to pull down. I'm pulling directly away from my project. That's how you get that cute little ridge to start forming on the top of your project. So let's do a few blanket stitches together. Poke through, come from behind, poke through, needle in front, poke through. Oop, gotta wrap my needle, wrap it behind, pull tight. And let's tie a knot again together because whoop, I unthreaded my needle, the thing I told you not to do. Oh man. All right, give me 1 second, let me rethread my needle. All right, needle's rethreaded, but remember how I said you want to leave a hand's length? So I am like less than a hand's length, so I'm going to tie a knot after this next stitch. I'm going to make my blanket stitch, my needle in front. Oh my god, I unthreaded my needle again. All right, hang tight. This is what's going to happen if you start getting too low. So if you keep unthreading your needle, know that you're too low and you have to tie a knot. This is my fancy little needle threader that I love so much. So, okay, let's tie a knot. Ready? I'm going to come through just through the front layer. Come through in the middle, take my thread, wrap it 1, 2, 3 times around my needle, and pull tight. So there's my knot, and then I'm going to sink my needle in and come out through just 1 layer, unthread my needle, and cut my thread. All right, So you guys go for it. Stitch up all of those cactus parts. I've got 2 done. I've just got 1 more that I got to do. I'm going to whip stitch all the way around. Whip stitch is certainly quicker, but blanket stitch has a really cute look to it that I think it really makes some handmade stuff really fun. So go ahead and stitch up your pieces, and I will see you in a minute. Alright, so I just finished stitching around my cactus leaves, I guess we can call them. We are going to take our thread, let's tie a knot together one last time because we always want to make sure we tie some good knots. So at the very end, if you want, because this is going to be on the bottom, you can stick it all the way through, half of the way. So I've got my needle half the way through. I'm going to grab the working thread that's coming out of my project and wrap it 1, 2, 3 times around my needle, and then I'm going to pull my needle out the rest of the way. And that's going to make a nice little knot to hold it in place. And that guy, you don't even have to bury, you can just cut. And got all your cactus parts sewn. So now let's put them together. You're going to layer all 3 of your cactus pieces right on top of one another, and this totally helps if you have a safety pin or a pin or something to pin them together, because what we are going to do now is sew them together right up the center line. So get a piece of thread ready, nice and long, and if you want to pin them together, go for it. You can even use binder clips if you want to, if you have binder clips around the house, or safety pins, or paper clips. You can paper clip it together to hold it in place. So let me get a piece of thread ready. Okay, so I've threaded up my needle. I'm going to take my 3 cactus pieces, and I'm actually going to stick a pin right in the middle, go through all the layers, try and keep them nice and even and centered, just so they stay secure, because we are stitching through all 6 layers right now, and that is going to be a little tricky, so just bear with me. We're doing a really basic hand sewing stitch called a running stitch for this part, and what we're going to do is stitch directly through all the layers. I'm going to draw a black line on mine. I'm sacrificing my cactus for you guys, but we're going to go all the way down the center from the bottom to the top, and we're going to stitch that line nice and strong. So make sure you got plenty of thread, because to go through all these layers you're going to need it. All right, so what I would love for everyone to do is, with the knot in the bottom end to start, go through all 3 of the layers. So if you see, I'm coming from the back, but it doesn't really matter. You just want to come up right on that line, or go right in on that line, and I'm going to pull really tight, and I'm going to take another whip stitch style stitch through the bottom. So if you see, I'm going through all my layers, and I'm coming up on the top, and I just went back to front, and let's see if I can get it out. I'm going to pull nice and tight because I really want to secure these guys together. And now for the fun part. A running stitch is literally down and then back up. I always like to think it's like a dolphin jumping up out of the water in waves. So you're going through the top, down the bottom, from the bottom to the top, from the top to the bottom. So let's running stitch this baby. So I'm in the top, I'm going to go straight through all of the layers. Make sure you're going nice and straight through, and I'm not taking a really big stitch. If you see, I'm maybe a ½ an inch. If you're uncertain by these measurements I'm throwing out, grab yourself a ruler and take a look. And if you have if you're a little kid sewing this, or if you are an older kid who wants to get good at your stitches, see, I'm maybe a ½ an inch away. That's my ½ inch mark. It's always good to start getting familiar with a ruler. So I'm going to go straight through. This is the back side. I'm going to pull tight, and then I'm going to come from the back side, not come around. I'm going to, where my thread is coming out, I'm going to go back in. Now I'm going to go over a little bit, and I'm going to come straight through. We're looking at the top. I'm coming right up on the line. Can you guys see that? And I'm going to pull tight. I'm going to take another stitch, go right in, straight through on that line from the top, and pull tight. And we're going to do that all the way up. Nice strong running stitches, not too far apart, because you want your cactus to stay together when we stuff it, because that's the next step. Stitches are no more than a ½ inch apart all the way up. Can you see them? And when I get to the top, I'm actually going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to poke all the way through, and I'm going to do a whip stitch. So I'm on the back side, I'm going to pull it around to the front, and I'm going to go through all 3 layers at the top again. I might even do that one more time, because this is a point of stress on our cactus when it gets stuffed. So I'm going to put all the way through. And then, guess what I'm going to do? Halfway through, take my thread, and I'm going to tie a knot, wrap it around the needle, pull super tight. Lost my needle, but that's okay. Pull super, super tight, so I got a really strong, you should be able to put a little bit of pressure on that and that's not gonna come apart. So there's that. All right, I can take my pin out. And look, by stitching all the layers together, that's how we got the cactus shape. So I think it looks pretty cute. I mean, if you sit here and crease it with your hands, you want to be gentle with it. Hand sewing isn't the most strong thing in the world, but look, there's our cactus shape, and here are all the opening parts for us to stuff. So let me move my needle out of the way and grab that. Now grab our fluff. You do not need a lot of fluff for this. That is plenty of fluff. I always like to break fluff up in my hands before I stuff anything because it can be kind of clumpy when it gets out of the box. Just like I said before, I like to use the merino wool felts or the wool blend felts because they biodegrade. Keep in mind, I very rarely like to use this polyfill. Polyfill is plastic, it is polyester, and they are teeny tiny microfibers that can get into our water supply. Animals can eat this. It's not good for our planet. Recycle an old pillow, chop up an old teddy bear. There's also a great company called Fab Scrap that sells shoddy, which is recycled fabric, so anything is better than buying brand new polyester fiber fill. Now I'm gonna grab my stuffing mechanism, aka a good old pencil, and I'm gonna put little bits of fluff in each one of these little sections, and I'm gonna gently use my pencil to stuff it in there, all right? Oh, looking pretty cute. And think when everybody else is fluffed, it's going to look pretty cute. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stuff all of these, and I'll see you back here in a second, okay? Okay, as you can see, I'm already almost stuffed, and it's looking super cute. Got one more little section to go, so let's get that stuffed, and then we're going to close the bottom of our cactus. So really not a lot of fluff. And you might not think you're putting that much fluff in them, but as they all get stuffed, look how like floofy it gets. It gets so floofy. Get it in there. Last little bit. And you're gonna learn real quick if you're hand sewing knots and all your stitches were nice and close, because if you're not careful, you'll blow through some of these. Oh, I got some extra thread. Let's cut that off. You'll blow through your stitches if you're not careful. And always remember, when you're cutting off your thread, don't cut off your knots. So here we go. Here's my cute little stuffed cactus. A little lopsided in some points. Maybe up here I can get the pencil in there to stuff up there. Yeah, and then that guy can get a little bit more fluff. But actually, I'm going to leave it just the way it is. So here's my cute little cactus. Now what do you think we're going to do? Close up the bottom. It is super important to close up the bottom. You don't want all your fluff to come out, and we're just going to do a simple whip stitch like we did before. So grab a nice long threaded needle, tie a knot in the end, front to back. And this is the bottom, and it's going to be hidden in our pot, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but you definitely want to sew it closed so nobody loses their fluff. And all I would recommend is just work your way across one piece at a time. So I picked one guy and I'm going right across. I'm just closing up the whole thing. I can even, if I wanted to, I can even turn and do this one. So I did this guy, and now I'm going to turn and do this guy. I think that's easier for my needle to and my thread to handle. So front to back. And this is a good challenge because you got a lot of other things in your way right now. So you're going to stitch that all the way up. We're going to tie knots at the end of each section. I'm not just going to cut my thread. I'm going to tie a knot, wrap and pull, and I'm going to go to the next section. And when I meet you back, we are going to cut. If we haven't already, you're going to cut your pot fabric. I mean, you can leave this like this if you really want. It would be cute sitting on a table just like this, but let's give it a little pot to live in, like it's a little house plant. All right, so I'm going to finish this, and then we're going to cut out our pot pieces if we haven't already, and we'll meet back and we'll sew these up. All right, sounds good. Okay, so at this point you should have all your sides sewn together, your cactus stuffed, and the bottom all closed up. So I just did, you know, quick and messy, but hey, I enjoyed doing it. My whip stitch to close everybody up so none of my fluff falls out. So just put this guy aside for right now, and now we're going to work on our cactus pot. So if you don't have my pattern, this is a very straightforward pattern to make. This is a 2-inch diameter circle. So if you draw yourself a 2-inch diameter, which is the length from side to side of your circle, you can then draw a cactus pot, which is pretty much a big rectangle. I curved it a little bit just so the pot kind of would sit out a little bit, like you are used to seeing your pots for all your houseplants sit in, which if this is 2 inches in diameter, that makes this distance about 6 1/4 long, because if you do 2 times pi, that's how you get the circumference of a circle, which is the distance around a circle. So 2 times 3.14 gets us 6 1/4, which this guy is 6 1/4 from this point to this point. So if you already have my pattern, you've cut it out, and then you've cut your felt pieces, and let's get to sewing them. You're going to want to thread up a needle, just like we have been. Where'd my needle go? Where'd my needle go? Here it is. Thread up a needle. I'm still using green, and this is a little bit of a tricky but fun challenge hand sewing. We're going to stick with a basic whip stitch for this, and what I'd really love to see everybody do, you want to lay the pot side on the table and put the pot bottom on top of it. And what we're going to do is this is like 1.5 inches or 2 inches from the end. We're going to start whip stitching through both layers. So I've got this edge is even, and I'm going to go through both layers. And this is the bottom of my pot, so I don't really care if a knot's down there, but if you do care, remember you're going to want to put it from the inside to the out. And I'm just going to make a little whip stitch. And as I go along, I am going to slowly move my circle piece to keep it along the edge of the side piece, and that's going to slowly make our 3D pot. So through both layers, this is a whip stitch, don't pull too tight, through both layers, and you can see I'm going to have to turn a little bit. It's hard to see because it's brown, but I'm going to just turn just the slightest bit so I can keep the edge that I am stitching, the two edges are always even. And we're going to work our way all the way around this guy. So you can see it's starting to form a rounded shape. So work your way all the way around, stitching the bottom piece to the side piece, and then I'll meet you back once we're done. And after I get more thread, it looks like. See you in a second. So as you can see, I have stitched most of the way around my little pot. It's starting to give me a good rounded shape. And if I keep going, these guys are going to just overlap. If they don't panic. It's all good. If they do more than mine, that's okay too. We're going to figure it all out. But what I'm going to keep doing is I'm going to keep doing my whip stitch around the edge. And as I get to the end of both of my side pieces, I'm going to let them overlap and try and stitch through both of them where they're overlapped. And see, my whip stitches are all really close to the edge of my bottom piece. Of course, I had to pick to film on a rainy day, but that's okay. So just then I went through all the layers. I'm going to finish stitching the bottom of my pot so none of our imaginary dirt escapes. And obviously when I get to the end, I'm going to tie a knot, wrap it around, pull tight. You should be pretty darn good at knots by now. And you can see that's where they just barely overlap. See that? And there's my little pot. Woo! So now what we're going to do is we're going to close up this little side piece, and we're going to do it with a basic running stitch. So if you've tied a knot, cut it off. You got enough thread, be sure to keep using that thread. I tied myself a new knot. Now to do this part, I'm going to come from behind of the top layer, the one that overlaps on top, which is this side, close to the edge. Can you see how close I am? And I'm going to pull tight. And this is a little weird, but you're going to use your left hand, your non-dominant hand, to hold the two layers together. So right here, I'm pinching the two layers together. And this is a little bit more advanced of a running stitch, but you're going to poke in through both and also come out in the same stitch to make your life so much easier. It's a quicker way to do a running stitch. So again, I'm going to hold them both. They're overlapped right here, and I'm pinching to hold it. I'm going to go in and come back out, and I'm going to try my best to keep my stitches even. Can you see how even my stitches kind of are? They don't have to be super close together here because this isn't holding any fluff in. This is just holding our pot together. But I'm going to poke in and come back out in the same stitch. And when I get to the top, you know what, for fun, I'm going to do a little bit of a whip stitch at the top. So I'm actually just going to go through both layers like that, and I'm going to tie a knot like we always do when we get to the tippity top. And there's my little pot, and I'll cut this. Now I don't really care how beautiful this top part is, because actually I think it's really cute if you take the top of the pot and you roll it over so it looks like it has a rim. So there's our little pot, and hopefully, if all of our stitching and cutting and everything went well, this guy should fit right in there. And if he doesn't, you might have overstuffed him, but we're going to just kind of shove him in there. And there we go. There's our cute little potted cactus. Now, see how this is kind of crumbling, and also as soon as I put it down, it might just like smush down. This is why before I said it'd be great if you have some cardboard, because what we can do is actually cut our pattern pieces for our pot out of the cardboard and stick it inside. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to trace them off, and I'm going to put pieces of cardboard on the inside. You can even just make a little ring to help it stand up. Maybe I'll just do that. A little ring to fit right inside there. And then it'll help your pot stand, and your cactus will have something to stand on top. Or if you don't have cardboard around and you've got some extra fluff, you can even shove some fluff into that pot as something to hold up your cactus and hold up the shape of the pot. But I don't always like that because sometimes you can see the fluff. Let's see how that works. Just tuck them all in there. Oh, actually, I think that worked really nicely. Maybe I won't even do the cardboard, but there we go. So here's my little cactus. So if you have gotten this far, congratulations, you have a cute little cactus. It can totally double as a adorable little pin cushion if you want. I actually was thinking that if you stick a bunch of pins in it, it totally looks like a cactus with all its pokies. See that? But if you want to give it a little bit extra pizzazz, you're going to grab the other colors that you might have around or other pieces of fabric that you might have, and let's make a little cactus flower, right? I didn't include a pattern for the cactus flower because I want to challenge you to make your own pattern or to free cut something. Let's get a little crafty, shall we? Now, I happen to have a whole bunch of purple felt lying around, so I figured this would make a really cute little two-toned purple flower for the top of my cactus, and I do have tons of embroidery floss around, so I grabbed a contrast color. You could also use some buttons, or if you have handmade flowers at home, or really anything that you think would add a little pizzazz to your little cactus, or if you love him the way he is, just leave him the way he is. But let's make a cactus flower for fun. Now, I did not include a pattern, but a few easy ways to make a flower is if you cut yourself a circle, which I know is challenging, but give yourself the best. Give yourself a circle, and then I love to just freehand cut some flowers, so I'm just gonna chop the edges in. I'm gonna do a bunch of little snips all the way around. I'm gonna try not to snip anybody off. That can be one layer of my flower. When I kind of mess it up and everything, it looks like a cute little flower. And then maybe the top one, I'll draw a pattern for. So let's grab our piece of scrap paper. Now, what I just did was cut and then do a bunch of little cuts into it. Other ways of doing it are you could cut a little firework fuzzy looking thing. And you can even draw this right onto your felt if that helps you. You could do a flower that looks like that. You have all different options, and you want to make your bottom one a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger than your top one. So if this lighter purple is going to be my top flower and that's my bottom flower, I think I'm gonna do something that looks like that. I think that'll help the texture. So I'm gonna free cut it, but you can make this, you can cut it out with your paper scissors and then trace it on with a marker, or you can get brave and you can cut yourself. In, out, in, out, in. This is a good way of doing it. Keep turning your scissors, making triangular cuts, see? Getting really good spiky pieces. And don't go for perfect. It doesn't have to look like a perfect flower. Put that little piece off. There you go, there's my weird flower, but see if they get layered up. And I'm gonna stitch this one to make it have a little dimension, like when I pinch it, so I can have the two, or maybe I flip them, so that one go on top. Maybe that one should go on top, and I'll pinch them. Yeah, I think I'll do, which way do I like it? I think I like the darker purple on top, actually. So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna make this little dimensional, so I'm gonna grab my embroidery floss, and I don't care if you can see it, but if you do, maybe get matching embroidery floss. Cut a piece that's long enough. We're going to split it like we do. Thread up my needle wherever my needle went. Do you find yourself losing your needle a lot too? Oh, here it is. It's still got green on it. Get the green out of there. Okay, what do we always do? We tie a knot. I'm going to grab this guy. I'm going to fold them in half, actually, and I'm going to just do a few whip stitches through the fold. So this is my folded edge, and I'm just going to do a few whip stitches together to hold it kind of all textural and in place. Dimensional is going to be my word. So that guy should stay like that. So you know, doesn't it look cute if I kind of mess up everything? Then using that same needle and thread, I'm going to go right through the center of my bottom layer, and let's stitch all the way through. Here, I'll even kind of wibble it around, come all the way through the top, so you get a little bit of pink on the outside. Can you see that? You can see my pink. If you know any decorative stitches, you can absolutely do some decorative stitches. You know, it'd be really cute is we did a few long ones, or I love the idea if you, from the good side, let's see if this will work. We're gonna try and make a floofy embroidery floss. I'm gonna take like we did before with our running stitch, I'm gonna come in and out on the top, and I'm gonna loop it around my finger. And I'm gonna keep looping it around my finger and taking little stitches through the center. Can you guys see that? Little stitches through the center, and using my finger to loop it. This is totally improvisational. I don't know if this is going to work. Leaving a bunch of loops. They might just all fall out, but let's try. For fun. Let's experiment. So there are all my loops. I'm going to tie a knot. And I'm going to tie a knot. Let's put it to the back. Tie a knot in the back where we're not going to see it. So halfway through, and wrap around my needle. And I'm going to cut that off. And look, I got a little weird loopsie-doop. I don't know, I dig it. Now, if you are sick of hand sewing, grab your good old Elmer's glue, dollop on the back, stick it on top. If you're still feeling ambitious and you want to stitch that on, I mean a little whip stitch to catch them together would be perfect, but honestly, I'm into Elmer's right now. My hands are tired. We stitched all this together. It looks so darn cute. Look at a little flower. And you can make more flowers. Don't just put it up there, put it on the side. Maybe a flower over here and up here would be great. Maybe a little face. You got some googly eyes hanging around? Give your cactus a little happy face. Or even give the pot a little happy face. Wouldn't that be adorable? Oh my gosh, I would love that little happy pot looking at me all the time. So I'm going to get some Elmer's glue. I'm going to stick that right on the top. And honestly, once you are done with that, you are done with your cactus. So go ahead and admire all that handiwork, because that was no easy feat. That was a lot of hand sewing. Good for you. If you have any questions, you know to ask me. dun, 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 dun. You did it! You sewed your own little adorable cactus out of felt and stuffing. I hope you enjoyed this project as much as I did. I really love little projects like this to get into hand sewing and to just spend time making something with my hands. If you have any questions, please comment below. I will find you and I will write you back. Follow me on Instagram, follow me on Facebook. All my information is below in the description area. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, feel free to Instagram me, feel free to Facebook me, all of that stuff. I am so easy to get a hold of. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed this project today. I hope I can make more. I hope that just gave you a little bit of peace while you sewed up this cute little cactus today. And I hope to see you guys soon. Have a great one.